Get the cash flow you need with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Pay expenses, make upgrades, perform maintenance, and more with interest-free and low-interest financing. Visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And also a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Hey, and speaking of Rural Radio 147, we got big news, huge news here today that RealAg Radio is signed a new 3-year agreement to continue to be on Rural Radio 147. This agreement's actually going to take us past our 10th year anniversary of the show. It is hard to believe that, man, time has flown. Time has flown. And it is truly an honor. And I mean this with just being just so real. I take it so seriously, us and our ability to talk to you every day. Farmers and ranchers across Canada and, of course, the United States, I thank you so much. As this audience for this show has grown over the years, we started out like, who the heck is this guy? To where we are today, and I greatly appreciate it. That includes, every morning at 10 o'clock Central, going on Market Day Report to talk about what's the latest and things that are happening in the world of agriculture. This has been a great relationship with Rural Media Group, RFD TV, and Rural Radio 147, and I am so excited that it's going to continue at least for the next 3 years. So fantastic stuff, and a big shout out to everybody over there at Rural Media Group, and it's been a great association for Real Agriculture and the creation here of RealAg Radio. Okay, today on the show, we got a beef market update with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. We're going to dive into what's going on from a cash market perspective, as well as what's going on with carcass weights. And are packers keeping up? Do we have any sort of a backlog? What are we seeing? And I'll, of course, be here with all of the details on that. And we've also got time of, like we do every Friday, a focus on our RealAg Issues panel. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner will both be here to really dig into the biggest issues of the week. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. We've talked about a lot of different issues throughout this week as we head into the August long weekend. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147, or you can find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms, right? We got X, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of them. We're across. We're even, I think maybe even Snapchat. I'm not even sure at this point. But if I go onto your favorite social media stream and search Real Agriculture and make us, become a fan, give us a follow, whatever it is you need to do, we'll distribute content to you throughout the days and weeks as we get a little bit closer into harvest. And we're going to talk about the RealAg Issues panel here today as far as harvest is it's here. And what are some of those yield expectations for farmers out across the countryside? But first, we got a beef market update, and we'll do that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, this segment's brought to you by the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. It's happening in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan from August 19th through the 22nd. There's networking, keynotes, breakouts. Learn how to increase profit, manage rangeland, and navigate trends. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register. That is CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com. Let's get into the beef market update with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, how are we doing on this fine Friday?
I am doing fine on this fine Friday. How about you?
Pretty good. It's gonna be a hot one. We could use a little bit of moisture. Maybe next week.
Yes, that's what I hear. So yeah, this is a scorcher, I think, is what we're planning for today. But hopefully, a change of systems even coming in tonight is what I understand here in Southwest Saskatchewan. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get a bit of an update. What's happening on the cash market?
Well, starting south of the border, it looks like U.S. trade's going to be called about $2 lower than last week. So in the south, in Texas and Kansas, most of the trade right around 188. In the north, the trades come in at 196 live and 310 delivered dressed. And those are also two lower than last week. So pretty much lower across the board, kind of that quiet summer doldrums, it feels like a little bit. The cutout was really, that choice cutout really last night was pretty much steady with where it was a week ago. I think packers were hoping, expecting to get it pushed higher. They've cut back on their kills, and typically, Shaun, when kills are reduced and production's reduced a bit on a weekly basis, the cutout tends to respond by going higher. So the fact that it only held steady, I guess is one way to look at, that's maybe as much as they can push it. You know, don't forget, Shaun, this cutout is still $10 over where it was last year. So even though it feels like it's struggling, it's still, for this time of the year, a record high cutout. Taking the market back into Western Canada, pretty much steady, I think is how we can call the Alberta-Saskatchewan fat cattle market. I think when the dust settles, 428 to 430 delivered dressed is going to be a lot of the trade. The weekly average last week was just shy of 257. We could be a little over 257 when Cass collects and finishes all the data this week. So, you know, it's still a very solid market as we head into August. The one thing I did want to just comment on and give listeners an update on was carcass weights. Here in Canada, we bottomed back in June, which is seasonally when we make our annual low for carcass weights. But last week, our steer weight in Canada was 916 pounds. That's 19 pounds over last year and 23 pounds over the 5-year average. And so these weights are starting to climb, which is seasonally normal, but they're climbing at a rate, you know, well above last year. And don't forget, last year's weights as we finished off 23 were record large. So, you know, I don't know if we want to be putting in record large weights on top of record large weights. It's producing a lot of beef that's moving so far, but it has been a bit of a weight on the market. So that kind of, one of the other things I just kind of wanted to talk about as well was, with July finished, we can kind of go back and look at, you know, how did the slaughter numbers look like in July here in Canada? And this is a confirmation. We've been seeing this from our cattle on feed numbers have been down. You know, here's our harvest numbers are down. So in July, our total cattle slaughter in Canada was 6% lower than last year. When you break down by category, there's some interesting stats. So Shaun, so Steer slaughter in July was down 11%. Heifer slaughter in July was up 21%. Cow slaughter was down 32%. Now, again, some of that, a little bit of still impact from the Guelph strike earlier in the month, but really telling a tale. So year to date, what's going on for 7 months in 2024? Our steer slaughter is down 6%, our heifer slaughter is up 2%, and our cow slaughter is down 14%. So telling some signs about, yeah, we knew those heifers went on feed last fall and earlier this year, and they're showing up in the data as far as slaughter numbers today. That point I made earlier about carcass weights, here's where it ties in. So slaughter numbers are down, but our carcass weights are up. So even though our Canadian cattle kill is down 5%, our total beef tonnage is only down 2%. So that's the impact of those heavier carcass weights.
Wow,
and you know what?
amazing.
Same thing going on south of the border, Shaun. Down 4.5% in the US. Their tonnage is only down 1.5%.
So, yeah, and if we go back like 15 years, and if when we first started doing these interviews, and if I had said, and we're going to see carcass levels on steers at these levels where we are here today, plus 900 pounds, what would your answer been? Shaun, you're nuts?
Yeah. I don't think we would have ever seen the capabilities of what's going on in feedlots today in terms of, individual head management, what's happened with genetics, nutrition. Like, there's been so many advances in our industry that the ultimate end result is these heavier carcass weights, which is a story of efficiency, which is a good news story, right? But no, to predict that, I don't know if I would have even predicted it 5 years ago, but it's certainly been we have to understand the impacts of these bigger carcass weights and tonnage, but it's a good news story from an efficiency perspective.
Yeah. Now, from a cattle inventory standpoint, USDA has pulled back on some of the reporting, and we're going to feel the impacts here in August, I believe, is one of the reports that's going to be omitted. We are going to have a Canadian cattle inventory report in about 3 weeks. What are some of the expectations out there regarding some of these numbers?
Yeah, well, so USDA's normally their July 1 cattle inventory report would have been released a week ago, like at the end of July. So that, like you say, for budget cuts, USDA is not going to produce that report, which is a disappointment to those of us that are into data. But anyways, that's a separate issue. But just, as we listen and talk to industry reps and outfits in the US that follow this data, kind of the guesstimates are that the US beef cow herd on July 1 was probably down 1.4, 1.5% compared to last year. So that's about 400,000 fewer beef cows. There's some belief that there's been some increase in beef replacement heifers in areas that did get some really good moisture in say Missouri and Nebraska and those areas earlier on. So that number could be up a bit. I think the interesting number to me, Shaun, is if you take the fact that the US had more cattle on feed on July 1st, so we talked about that report a couple weeks ago, and you talk about the smaller cow numbers and calf crop, it means that as we head into the second half of 24, we've got the feeder cattle supply outside of feedlots down probably between 2 and 3% from last year. That's 850,000 head fewer feeder cattle and calves for cattle feeders to be bidding on in terms of their supply to fill their yards in the second half of this year. So that's going to be hugely supportive. And I think bring that home to Canada when we do get our report out later this month. We're going to see a very similar storyline. I don't think we've seen that heifer retention just because, we came out of pretty dire drought conditions last year. But we'll wait and see what happens with the 2024 heifer calf crop. But we won't know that until we're into 2025.
Yeah, and you continue to hear from producers, I need sustained good prices before I maybe get too excited about doing some of that heifer retention. Now, if this time next year, if we have had, decent grass again for parts of the growing, for the main part of the grazing season, then we're probably going to be sort of scratching our head a little bit. But that number makes sense. Doesn't it to you as far as the attitude of producers right now?
Yeah, for sure. And that,
Yeah.
and again, here we've had a month of some super hot, dry weather. And so it just adds one more layer of, okay, what's our next weather event look like? Or folks like Matt Makins and the other meteorologists that we follow, talking about going back into La Nina conditions as we finish off 24 and into 25. So folks are going to be wondering about, weather conditions for sure, even though we've had a great start and great grass and great forage year so far in 24. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a slam dunk. You're right.
Hey, and to finish up here, want to get your thoughts. This week we had the passing of former Saskatchewan Agriculture Minister Lyle Stewart. I know that you had several encounters with Minister Stewart over the years. What are your thoughts?
Oh, you know what, Shaun? The first time when Lyle was appointed as a ag minister in Saskatchewan, he attended, I think one of his first meetings that he attended as the new ag minister was a stock grower AGM, and it was being held in Cypress Hills in June. And I can't remember what year this was, Shaun, so you'll have to fill it in. But I remember it well. You were emceeing, I was speaking on markets there. It was snowing outside, so we're in Cyprus in June at a stock grower meeting, and it's snowing. But Lyle, just clear as the day, was that down to earth. You could have the conversation with him. He was that would be just that kind of that common sense, easy to speak to fellow. That's how I always saw and really remembered Lyle Stewart.
Yeah, I talked about this earlier this week. I remember that meeting. That's the first. Yeah, talk about being thrown into the deep end as the ag minister, because I remember ranchers were owly that day because there was changes to some of the pasture regulations and people wanted answers. And he had been appointed on the Thursday or Friday previous. Shows up on the Monday. There's like 2 feet of snow in the Cypress Hills, and like would it be like May? It it was quite the event, and I have the same fond memories of his just being just a regular person you could really, really relate to. And I think that's why so many people were attracted to him as minister.
Yeah, no, I would agree wholeheartedly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Anne, have yourself a great weekend.
Okay, thanks, Shaun. You too.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this with the Real Ag Issues Pin.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And as we announced today, we're back for another 3 years. We are so excited about being able to continue to speak to all of you across Canada and the United States here on Rural Radio 147. And it's not just me, but a big part of the team that makes it all happen is our panelists today. Up first, Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you doing?
I am doing incredibly well, though I am melting.
It's been
It
hot
is very
there.
hot. Super hot. Been
Hot
under a
and
heat
humid.
warning for days. So yes, I am melting. But yes, also excited about our announcement. Kind of mind-blowing to think that this will take us past the 10-year mark of this show.
Yeah, well,
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
No kidding. No kidding. We had that crazy, a big part of the craziness. I was just going to tell a story, but I'll bring in Kelvin Heppner from Altona, Manitoba, because he'll remember very well. Hey, Kelvin, I got an idea. We're going to start a satellite radio show. And the best part is we're going to be on the air in like 6 weeks. So you were on radio. How do we do this? Remember that?
Yeah, was it even 6 weeks?
I
remember vividly. I was in the Grand Forks, North Dakota airport when you called. I remember that conversation, and I think I was on my way to or from the U.S. Farm Progress show, which is always at the end of August, early September, and we launched on October 24th. So yeah, you're right. It might have been 6 weeks. October 24th, 2016.
Yeah. That's where both y'all went back to your families and said, this Haney guy's crazy.
Yeah, he's officially jumped the shark.
I think he's lost his mind. So, but yeah, glad I did. Now we heard from Lyndsey, hot, humid in Eastern Canada. Kelvin, how's the weather been your way?
It's been hot and dry, but certainly crops are moving along. We're seeing some early barley harvests starting. The winter wheat is also coming off the limited acres that there are, and pre-harvest applications are starting in spring wheat in this area. So yeah, things are going to be full swing here before we know it. There's a bit of a cold front coming in here on the weekend. It'll cool off a bit, but it's also been hot here the last while.
We're supposed to get some rain potentially in southern Alberta next week, so we'll see, because there's still time for that forecast to change, of course. But hey, before we get into some of the issues, the answer to your above-the-ground nitrogen loss problem is Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvil's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. You know, one of the things that we learned this week is don't talk about good crops. So, if any of you watched Rob Saik, who many of you know very well, on Facebook and Twitter, he posted a crop report. He had traveled a significant amount of kilometers across Western Canada, talked about how there's a pretty good crop out there, and some people got very angry. I sometimes hear from these same people when I talk about, we got a decent crop out there. But I was on AgriTalk this morning, and Michelle Jones, who farms in Billings, Montana, okay, so just south of the Canadian border, she's into her wheat, and she says, like, much better than they thought, even considering they had 20 straight days of 95 plus, Kelvin. So maybe there is more yield out there than we think. Maybe.
Well, I also farm on the side as well here, Shaun. So yeah, I understand the feedback when people say let's not get the market's hopes up too much about how much crop is out there, and certainly timing is a factor here too. And that's something that some of the people commenting on Rob's video noted as well, that the time that it's been hot and dry since his travels across Saskatchewan, and he acknowledged that in a good follow-up video in the last day or two here. But yeah, we'll see now how much this heat and in the late season lack of moisture has impacted yield in the coming weeks.
Okay, but okay, to be fair, if you think that comments from someone like me or Rob Saik or whoever, if you think that we are talking up the potential of what crop is out there too much, and the market's going lower because of it, buy a call option. Go long the futures market if you think we're going to be short.
I do wonder.
It's much easier to just complain on social
yeah,
media.
Exactly. I was going to say I think there's a few things at play here. One of them being, of course, your own local bias, right? So it's tough to hear that a crop is, a big bumper crop when you're looking at perhaps your fields that are pretty disappointing. We certainly are seeing, the pea harvest coming in maybe a little too quickly because of this heat, and that's biting into yields. We're seeing, perhaps some cereals that are getting hastened to harvest as well. So I think there's that part. And then also we get grumpy when markets aren't great, and frankly, we need to take it out on someone, I think, sometimes. So, as wise as Rob is and as influential as you are, Shaun, I'm sorry, but I don't think anything you say is going to significantly move the market. But when we're grumpy, we need to blame somebody.
Yeah,
so
I don't think there's any trader in Chicago listening to anything that this radio show.
Or maybe they listen and laugh. Who knows?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now south of the border, StoneX, they're estimating above trend line U.S. corn and soybean yields. So StoneX is saying that U.S. corn production is going to be at 15.207 billion bushels on a yield of 182.3, and an average soybean yield 52.6. So yeah, and this is why the markets have been moving in the direction that they have. Although, Lyndsey, we did hear earlier this week Neil Townsend from Grain Fox. He felt a little bit like wheat had maybe a story to tell to the potential upside.
Well, and you know what? This is one of the realities of, what we go through year over year. Yes, there's always wheat being harvested somewhere in the world every month as we roll through the season. But, there are areas that are facing some challenging conditions or did have challenging conditions this year. And I liked how Neil sort of puts it that, the story is not all told as of yet. And there's always that glimmer of perhaps a production issue, a supply issue, or some demand coming online that maybe we didn't expect. So I think I think he spells out, some of those chances. Some of them are maybe better than others of where things don't go well. And it is true, this crop is not made everywhere in the world as of yet. And we still have to see where it goes. And frankly, for those of us who think highly of wheat, it's always nice to hear there might be some good news coming down the pipe.
Yeah. You and Wheat Pete.
Yes.
You and Wheat Pete.
That's
Kelvin,
right.
I've been asking farmers on the Farmer Rapid Fire on Thursday's show, and Lyndsey graciously hosted this week. Trying to figure out, how are you steering through some of this market activity as we get a little bit closer to harvest? For you as a farmer yourself, how have you been managing some of these markets and the more bearish tone that they've exhibited?
I'm with Wheat Pete on. I know you talked about this on Monday's Tuesday's show as well. I'm not my track record is not one where people want to follow my advice on this. I do try to usually just take a more steady approach and sell a bit here and a bit there and go for the average or above average overall, but not predicting the highs or bottoms. And this year we've certainly, along with many other farms, I think we've held on to crop too long in the bin with 23 crop, and looking now like we maybe wish we would have sold some more 24 crop than we have at this point. But yeah, it's certainly a challenge feeling confident on the marketing side of things these days.
Well, we've officially flipped into the new crop year. What's the update on the rail strike?
Well, so far, I'd say there isn't a huge update. The parties are all planning to meet at so we have a new labor minister as of a couple of weeks ago. Stephen McKinnon has called both Railways CN and CPKC, as well as the union that represents the employees for both railways, the Teamsters, to his office in Gatineau, and they're planning to meet on Monday. And so that's kind of been the big development this week. So we'll see whether something comes out of it Monday. Both railways have had earnings calls recently. CPKC, in their earnings call this week, their CEO, Keith Creel, seemed more pessimistic than the CN executives. Creel said that he is expecting a strike in the second half of August here, and we are still awaiting that Canada Industrial Relations Board report. So they're right. So the union was in a position to strike back in May. At that time, then Labour Minister Seamus O'Regan asked the Industrial Relations Board to examine whether there was a public safety concern about a strike. And so that review has been underway, and we're expecting a ruling sometime in the next week or so. There's an August 9th deadline that's been talked about regarding a decision there. And so if that report is made public and the union can meet those conditions laid out in it, a work stoppage we would likely expect sometime to follow shortly after, unless the parties can come to a deal and there's some progress in this meeting at the Labour Minister's office in Gatineau on Monday.
Well, with Canada being so trade reliant, and the railways being such a focal point of getting product to port, not just in agriculture, but other products and commodities as well. Think of the auto sector, for example. Like, I can't, at a time where Canada's economic strength is being somewhat questioned, Lyndsey, this would be a terrible, terrible timing for a strike. And I guess that maybe gives the union leverage, I guess.
Well, and I mean, realistically, it does, right? If it's terrible time for the markets or for rail traffic, then that's a great time for unions, as they essentially are pushing for what they want. And I I struggle with this one certainly because as you've laid out, we are so reliant. We have two main railways. We are already subject to things like extreme winters, which slows things down. We've had the fire issues, of course, in Alberta that have closed track and have threatened potential rail movements. But realistically, I find it interesting that we've had this strike or the threat of the strike sort of moved into August from back in May due to this, public safety issues, etc. And I just feel like it feels like we're missing some form of dealing with this in a more permanent way, that we can have a rail service that actually functions year round as best as it can, other than Mother Nature. But to me, labor issues are avoidable ones, and we shouldn't be scrambling every time there's a threat of a strike to try and get ahead of this. And it just feels like we're constantly working with the next strike, the next strike, the next strike. And at some point, we need to have a better solution than keep band-aiding this. Because, as you pointed out, we are already at times, and perhaps more than usual, our export customers are wondering if they can actually get product. And what happens if a customer orders something and they can't get it or is told they can't get it? They go find it somewhere else.
Well,
that's all there is to it.
You know what other party is worried about wanting something and they can't get it? The Olympic athletes. Because in the Olympic Village, the Paris Olympic Committee, they went vegan, and the athletes had a different perspective. We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
We are joined right now by the Canadian consultant for Helena, Patrick Lyndsey.
Helena is a leading company that delivers formulation technology into the ag industry across the U.S., and a number of those work excellently up here in Canada.
Why do you get excited about research?
Probably 50 years there's been data out there that has proven that good humic product can have an excellent return on investment. Research delivers that to almost anybody who grows a crop and adds it into their fertilizer blend the year of application. All across Canada, we have these different types of soils and fits into almost any different application you can come across. And if we can increase the amount of nutrients, then you just have a much higher quality product that you're able to grow that season. Yeah. These biostimulants can be used to take your nutrient use efficiency. Adding in the right biostimulants, such as Resurge, can bump that from 40 to 60, perhaps up to 50 to 80, making that investment much more valuable.
So you can find out more by going to helenaagra.com. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday as we creep into the August long weekend that we're about to have here in Canada. Looking forward to it. And there's sad story. There won't be any new shows next week, but we've got some great replays. We've got 2 shows from baseball games. Plus, then we've got 3 farmer rapid fires from the past number of weeks. So you can enjoy those replays and listening to each of them involve farmers, right? We got farmer panels in each of them, as well as, of course, the farmer rapid fire always is farmer focused. So lots of great content for you to consume as next week we are off. Hey, are you satisfied with this year's emergence? Make it even better with Vatterstad's line of seeding and planting equipment, including Seed Hawk air seeders and precision delivery air carts, or the Tempo high-speed planter, featuring unmatched precision in all conditions. Learn more at Vatterstad.com. Well, like we were just discussing in the last segment, the athletes at the Olympic Village in Paris, when I think athletes, I think the need for things like protein, to fuel them in their competitive spirits in the competition. Well, the Olympic Committee had a different idea. They went vegan. Yeah, because that's what athletes want. Beans. Kelvin, lots of pushback, and it sounds like the Olympic Committee, even though they were warned about this decision, they forged ahead anyway because they wanted to educate the athletes about climate change. They had to wheel in a whole bunch of eggs and some chicken to make the athletes happy.
Yeah, and there's been quite a few athletes publicly complaining about the food options, not enough protein, like you said, animal protein options, eggs specifically, red meat as well, chicken, like you said. There's been a shortage of eggs in the athletes' village cafeteria, apparently. And so, yeah, ahead of these Olympics, the Paris 2024 officials had a target of having 60% of the food served at the athlete village be vegan, as this was part of their effort to reduce the carbon footprint of each meal. And I know that's something where I think we can get into a real big debate and argument over how those emissions are measured on animal proteins, certainly when it comes to beef and grasslands and all the different animal livestock proteins that are options out there, and how that's measured, especially in the mainstream from an overly symptomatic perspective. But like you said, they were warned about this, and now it has actually backfired to some extent as these athletes are going public with their complaints. And they've also had to order in a bunch of extra meat, and I think I saw 700 kilograms worth of eggs. I'm not sure how many eggs that is, but yeah, quite a few. They've had to call in an emergency supply of animal-based protein, non-vegan protein, to provide the nutrition that these athletes, of course, are expecting. Nobody wants to go to the Olympics in Paris and then spend 2 weeks eating food that you're not used to and sleeping on a cardboard bed. So
yeah,
it's affecting performance in some cases, it sounds like.
Well, if you're looking for a better bed, you want to be one of the surfers, because they're surfing 10,000 miles away in Tahiti, and they're on a cruise ship. The surfers won. In this case,
They won.
Lyndsey, this is a classic case with this vegan push by the French Olympic Committee. This is a classic case of the consumer is always right unless you have an agenda, and that's exactly what has transpired here.
Well, and yeah, like, to put it that way, that realistically, this is the idea of, like, this is what we all should be doing for carbon emissions, for climate change. Obviously this is what we're going to do. But in reality, and as Kelvin alludes to, we can go through the math on how they figure these things and whether or not it's actually that big of a difference, or why we would vilify incredibly nutrient dense. So are we figuring it out per calorie? Because I think we could have that discussion. But realistically, each individual person is going to have to choose, for themselves what they want, etc. And it also, this idea that somehow vegan is going to be better for the environment, etc., totally negates the fact that these are elite athletes that likely consume and need to consume twice the amount of protein and calories that the average person does, because they're burning it off. Like, this is not the time. The Olympics are not the time or the venue or the place to be trying to make people eat nothing but salad and chickpeas. Like, that's just not the time or place. Maybe for the staff or whatever the case may be, sure, fine, fill your boots. But this is supposed to be, athletes have trained for years to be there, to end up hungry on day 3 because they're burning through calories and they need nutrient dense meals. It's ridiculous, and really does show that, you can, on paper, you can, sketch out anything you want to do, but in reality, humans are far more complex than that, and we have nutritional needs, especially for athletes, that simply aren't going to be met by a vegan diet.
Yeah, athletes like you and I, right? Like, exactly.
Maybe you, not so much me.
Well,
I am one that does not need to consume that many calories.
I'm sure the 250-pound, deadlift competitor who's trying to consume 300 grams of protein in a day, I'm sure he was super excited when he walked into the Olympic Village on day 1. But anyway, okay. This is kind of a negative story. I don't want to go on too long about this, but it is a reality, and it's a great indicator about where farm profitability is right now, or will be in 2024. And that's the struggles, like we've been talking about in the past weeks, in the machinery space. It's not a great story. and it's the look ahead. It's some of the earnings forecasts that are a real concern. We had more layoffs this week. Kelvin, I know you've been putting together kind of a summary of the different companies, Eggco, CNH, Kinsey this week. Not great news.
No, exactly. It's really tough news right now in the manufacturing side of things, and these are just companies that are publicly acknowledging layoffs. There could be more happening quietly that we don't know about or don't hear about or don't have confirmed. But like you said, Kinsey this week, as of August 1st, yesterday announced that they are laying off nearly a quarter of their workforce in Williamsburg, Iowa. John Deere confirmed another 130 some layoffs this week in Moline, Illinois, adding to their global workforce reduction that's seen more than 1,000 Deere staff let go here over the last few months. Deere, of course, is the biggest company, so they've also got the highest total number of employees, but that's still a major significant number there. CNH, like you said, they actually had their second quarter earnings call on Wednesday and said that their net ag sales had declined by 20% versus the same quarter last year, and that CNH, so this is the parent company of Case and New Holland, has reduced its ag production hours by 30% year over year. Also this week, we had Agco release their second quarter earnings, and they reported a reduction in ag production hours of 23%, and that net sales for the quarter were down just over 15%. And so, yeah, not positive news to be found here in many places. And this is coming a few weeks after we heard of Salford Group, Ontario founded company owned by Linamar now, also downsizing as they're closing a plant in Iowa. And so, yeah, it's looking like we should probably expect more of this type of news here in the coming months. So certainly some tough decisions being made in a lot of the manufacturing businesses right now.
Well, it's just amazing to me how we go from where can't produce enough units, prices are spiking, the used market's going crazy, to so quickly it feels to where we're like, we got to slow down production. We got to cut this factory. We're cutting back hours. We're laying off staff. It feels like it's abruptly grinded to a halt. It just, and I know that's just from an outsider looking in, but boy, this has been a quick turnaround, Lyndsey.
Well, it has. And I mean, if we use, and I know we sort of use the equipment side of things as sort of proxy for farm profitability, and they are quite closely related. And realistically, if we look what the markets have done in the last little while, I would think if you put the two over each other, you're going to see some parallels there as well. You did mention the used market. I don't know if you guys have been watching what some of these relatively new combines have been going for at auction. But if you have the money to pick up some of these quite new machines, you can get a steal of a deal, like a screaming deal on some of these. And that means somebody's losing out, right? Somebody paid a lot of money and isn't getting that money back. So when you start putting it all together as far as farm profitability and where the markets are headed, and then we look at, what the equipment companies are doing, it's definitely just a product of the last few years of inflationary pressure, et cetera. And I will just put and we can talk about this, but I'll just put out there as well. Yes, it comes down to what farmers can afford, but also I think this does dovetail into a larger discussion that I think we need to have about the cost of parts, about the availability of parts, a lot of farmers are expressing how frustrated they are by spending all this money on shiny new equipment and not having the support there for keeping rolling when they need to, or the cost of, fixing these machines, even though they're quite new, has been astronomical. And farmers are frustrated by the quality of product as well. So there's a lot going on that leads to this, but I think overall it just shows that it is definitely a downturn and probably one we're going to have to ride out for a little while.
Well, it's just not equipment though. My daughter bought a Mac laptop for school. She had it for 2 years. It kind of, it wasn't working. Took it into the tech place, and their reaction was, it's 2 years old. What do you expect?
Yeah, just buy a new one.
Yeah, like what? Huh?
And you're like, no, we can't have disposable stuff.
No,
it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. You want to talk about a job that's obsolete? What happened to the TV repairman? Remember that guy? He doesn't exist anymore. He's gone. Just buy a new one. Hey, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a TV show that made an epic bad decision on their program, The Amazing Race. We'll talk about that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains. FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday. Long weekend in front of us. Harvest is right in front of us as well. There's a lot to do on the farm. Hopefully some of you are going to get some, maybe one day away, maybe a little bit of camping, maybe some lake time. Do your best if you can. Hey, the best answer for agronomically effective dual nitrogen protection is Super U. Super U Premium Fertilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how this ready-to-use granular fertilizer protects nitrogen and boosts efficiency, visit kochag.ca. Well, Kelvin, this Amazing Race, right? Amazing Race Canada has been on TV for for quite a while, a lot of seasons. But it's always nice when TV shows incorporate agriculture and sometimes mostly like a romantic, cute way. But Amazing Race made a really big mistake where they incorporated some stored grain. What huge safety problem. What did they do?
It's the optics, I think, and the message that this episode that showed this week. It's like you said, season 10 of The Amazing Race Canada, and on July 30th, the reality show contestants visited in the show that aired this week. They visited Avena Foods in Regina, and they were, as one of their contests, required to dig through grain hopper trailers filled with oats to find a hidden object. It was actually a waffle that secured their breakfast reservation at a restaurant, but the contest was a throwback to the first season of Amazing Race Canada, when they similarly dug through hopper trailers filled with lentils. And so right with this episode airing this week, the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association has their Be Grain Safe Week and a campaign that they launched originally back with Real Agriculture back in 2016. The Canadian Ag Safety Association is raising concerns about the message that this episode sent, and trying to raise awareness about the dangers of grain entrapment. As you go back to 2011 through 2020, there were 27 fatalities in Canada due to asphyxiation in grain or in soil, and that included at least 4 children in the prairie provinces. Some of those cases we remember well, and so it certainly wasn't a great portrayal of grain safety.
Yeah, and hey, not like it's intentional, Lyndsey, but it's also good that this is why we have organizations like CASA to speak up and try to educate people inside agriculture and out of it.
Yeah, and it does, we think about in filming some of these shows and that sort of stuff, you always see, they do, death-defying stunts, and you have to grab certain things, and they've got harnesses and all sorts of stuff. And you watch this one and you realize that it really does sort of show just how benign people could think that, grain in the back of a truck might be, or grain in a bin, or those sorts of things, because it seems like it's something that you could just dig through or walk in. The problem is, of course, as we all know, you can sink and exactly that. You can suffocate in mere moments. And so it really does show, I think, just a lack of understanding of the risks from the production crew and the people that are involved. And so, I, for one, am glad that Casa is speaking up and saying, like, look, we don't want to encourage people who are, let's say, new to a farm. So just like this crew and everything that showed up there, nobody put up their hand, as far as we know, and said, guys, this maybe isn't a great idea. People visit farms all the time. You've got your non-farming neighbors, cousins, nieces, whatever, and nephews that come by. We want to make sure that people recognize that, stored grain in a bin, in a truck, whatever it may be, is actually a risk, and that's a no-go zone. And I think it is really important that we make that message clear.
Well, the other message that's clear is Canada does not look good in this whole controversy about soccer and the use of a drone.
Oh my gosh.
And the bad. Yeah. Not good. We look like cheaters.
Well,
don't we?
Yeah,
How bad is this?
How many other countries are doing it though? That's the question that I have regarding that this whole thing. In Canada, we often say that we play the card of being so nice and kind and all of that, and I think that maybe that's contributing to some of what's happened here too.
So
we're hard on ourselves. We hold ourselves accountable.
We're taking the fall for others, maybe, is what you're saying. Well,
I think there's other countries that do this too, for sure. And so I don't doubt that. And we just have a higher expectation of our representatives, and so now they're being Soccer Canada and all the people involved, the coaches involved. Certainly, it wasn't good ethics what they did, but if everybody else is doing it, then I'm not sure that the punishment is fair. And fortunately, the players who likely weren't part of all of this cheating, the players did their part and won their 3 games this week, so they are through and don't have to suffer from that 6-point penalty that was handed down to them. But it's not a good look. You're right.
Yeah. I found it interesting that Soccer Canada, through John Herdman, former men's coach and women's coach, they mentioned him outright. Like, they're not protecting. This goes back a while, and probably we do hold ourselves a little bit more accountable. That's actually interesting perspective, Kelvin, and I agree with you. I have no doubts that other countries are doing this, have done it. Do you think we're going to issue, is there an issue where we're going to be talking about people using drones spying on each other's farms? Is that something that is a thing, Lyndsey?
Well, I would say farming is competitive, but I don't think it's that competitive. I think, though, from another perspective, just about privacy, as well as, I would say, as a livestock producer, I've thought about the fact that, could we see activists potentially spying using drones and these sorts of things? I think that might be most likely. It does seem interesting, though, doesn't it, that when we think about drones, we tend to think about nefarious activities, which isn't necessarily fair, right? These are very useful pieces of equipment, and we know that we can do some great scouting with them. We know that we can seed with them, and these sorts of things. So not to say that drones are inherently bad, but it does seem that there certainly could be more naughty things you do with them. So I think it's something that, as from the agricultural perspective, I think that we need to be aware of what could happen with these, and certainly there is a privacy issue. I have enough people that stop and take pictures of my front yard on the road and have to deal with that. I don't want people flying a drone over and taking pictures too. So there you go.
No. Hey, we're out of time. Really, really appreciate. I know both of you are trying to get everything wrapped up here before we get into the long weekend. So, hey, Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. That's keep farm safety in mind. Lyndsey, all the best to you.
You as well.
Okay, everybody, if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms as Real Agriculture. And you can also call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, everybody.
Get flexible farm financing with an APP cash advance from CCGA. Save on interest costs and sell when the time and price are best for you. Visit ccga.ca to learn more. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advanced Payments Program.